The age of Aquarius ended at 141 hours, 30 minutes, ground elapsed time.
In the words of John McLeish. Almost as poetic as Archibald McLeish, no relation as far as I know. And so Aquarius does drift slowly back and away from the command module so that there will be plenty of separation at the time they both re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. All three of these parts now are separated. The service module, which was useless where the explosion took place, the lunar module, which was indeed a lifesaver and brought the command module safely home, and now the command module by itself. The lunar module will burn up on re-entry into the atmosphere, as will the service module, neither one of them having the protective heat shield that the command module has, nor any facility for directing their course if they did have a heat shield. So they will tumble and burn. There was one part, however, of the lunar module which is almost certain to re-enter intact, and that is a 24-inch long and 8-inch in diameter canister, graphite cask in which is plutonium-238, the radioactive isotope of plutonium that was to have been used to create the power for the atomic generator on the moon to give power to the scientific station to be established there. We have some more information on what's going to happen to that lunar module fuel cask. It's 8 pounds of plutonium. Nelson Benton first at Grumman.
Oh, Walter, if we were following the flight plan, of course, neither Scott McCloud nor I would be inside the LEM, but neither would this fuel cask be inside the LEM. We brought it in here to show it to you. And this, of course, is a mock-up. It doesn't have the real plutonium inside, but just so you can see what it looks like, if we can get it out.
My hand?
Yeah, I need a hand here, Scott. Afraid we were going to run into this problem. Well, won't come out, Walter, but anyhow, inside is a cask of plutonium that was to be used to power the scientific package that was to be left on the moon, and it's enclosed in what looks like almost a torpedo tube. And Scott, we've been checking with some of the chemists out here, and what do you find out about its survivability?
Well, it will survive. It's designed to survive. When it enters the water, there should be no problem, and the chemists have told us that it's chemically and biologically inert.
Which means
no damage. It could not damage any individual that picked it up, even, except the heat.
It would damage from the heat, or there would be radioactivity, but no danger of the plutonium inside reacting with any other substance.
Right.
And Walter, this may be the only part that comes through intact, if it indeed does, and if indeed they find it after it comes through.
Don't feel bad about not being able to get that that core out of there. If you remember, Alan Bean and Pete Conrad had a little trouble on Apollo 12 exactly the same fashion. And finally, might be a suggestion for you, Nelson. Pete Conrad hit it on the side with a hammer and jarred it loose.
Well, we don't have the right tools to do it with, Walter, to start with.
Furthermore, Grumman might not want you hitting their cask on the side with a hammer now. Well, we could tell you more about this atomic package and what it does by going down to Bruce Morton in Houston, who's with Robert Carpenter of the Atomic Energy Commission. Gentlemen?
Walter, we don't have a hammer, but we do have a canister that works, I think. Mr. Carpenter, would you show us how this works, where the radioactive element is and where the casing is?
Well, this is the proper tool here, which Grumman didn't have. And this is the fuel capsule in a superalloy metallic container, which is the heat source for the SNAP-27 on the moon. This is the capsule and its containment that we're trying to protect during the re-entry of the graphite cask.
Now, coming back, of course, this is back inside here, and this obviously is not plastic. This is the graphite casing, is it?
That's correct. The black casing you saw at Grumman is represented here by this plastic so you can see the internal construction. There's redundant protection here. The graphite outer layer is for ablative protection, and in order to prevent heat from transferring into the metallic capsule, we have an inner heat sink of beryllium represented by this shiny cylinder in the center here.
Now, is there any chance at all, if this came in on a funny angle or something, of the shielding not doing its job and some radioactivity being spread?
Well, different than the command module, which has to come in one side first, this has omnidirectional protection. It can come in side-on stable, so that the flat side is getting the heating, or it can come in tumbling. We've looked at both cases, and there's no problem in either case as far as the reentry heating is concerned.
Does the Atomic Energy Commission, we've heard some reports to this effect, plan to send planes up anyway just to make sure there's no radioactivity in the atmosphere?
We have asked the Air Weather Service plane, which is in the area as normal support for the Apollo mission, to remain in the area and take high-altitude samples, which is part of their normal type of function anyhow. Now, the purpose of this is not that we're particularly concerned that this is not going to do its job, but just for verification purposes, we want to take samples in the area to get negative samples as proof positive.
But you feel there's no danger at all here?
This has been looked at in much deeper angles than we're going to come in at today. This reentry we're getting is a so-called nominal reentry. We've looked at much deeper and higher heating rates than that, and analytically, this cask has a lot of thermal margin.
Walter, we might add one other confusing fact here. It's my understanding from Mr. Carpenter that this will land a day earlier than the astronauts. That's because it's on one side of the international date line and they're on the other.
It actually lands 10 minutes before the astronauts, but it is a different day.
The astronauts, I think, are 500 miles west of the date line, and this is supposed to come down about 500 miles. They're 500 miles east of the date line, and this is supposed to come down 500 miles downrange from them, so it must be right about on the date line, isn't it?
Just on the other side, I think.
Yep.
That's correct.
Well, interesting enough. And SNAP stands for System for Nuclear Power Auxiliary. Is that correct?
That's correct.
SNAP 27. Does that mean your 27th model? What happened to the other 26?
Well, we've come all the way from one, and SNAP 27 just happens to be the number assigned to this.
All right. This is the first atomic power plant flown in space, isn't it? The one that went up on Apollo 12, or has there been some other atomic unit up in space?
SNAP 27 on Apollo 12 was the first one used on the moon. The first nuclear power unit, the SNAP 3, that went into space was on a Navy navigation satellite, Earth orbital satellite, back in 1961.
Is it still operating?
Yes, sir, it's still putting out power.
And how long do those SNAP 27s work on the moon?
The nominal lifetime requirement is 1 year, but that's sort of tied to the electronic equipment lifetime. The isotope, half of it still be there 90 years from now, and we fully expect the generator itself would operate in excess of 5 years.
Thank you very much, gentlemen in Houston. So we have the word of the Atomic Energy Commission that there is nothing to fear from the reentry, even the 5,000 degrees heat of that plutonium-238 in the fuel power cask of the SNAP 27 power plant that was to have been placed on the moon's surface. The astronauts now are just checking out facilities now that they're in the command module, sealed off in it. The lunar module is drifting away from them, and they are presumably in good shape now for re-entry. They're going to maneuver into their entry attitude just about now, perhaps are doing so, and let's see if there are any communications from them. We are listening in. You can hear the static of communications behind us. They're communicating now to Houston by way of Canberra, Australia, the little hamlet outside there called Honeysuckle, where the big, one of the big dishes, antennas, is tuned to them. There are 3 of these large antennae, 3 points around the world, so that each of them has a coverage. One of them has coverage at all times as the Earth turns beneath the flight of a lunar mission. And right now, Canberra, Australia is the one that is in touch. There are no communications right at this moment. The last we had was that the lunar module was holding its attitude, and I'm not just sure precisely what they mean by that, whether it's holding a position or just an attitude and is not tumbling. I assume they mean that it is not tumbling. It wouldn't make any difference to the man in the command module if it were tumbling. It was just to be a point of scientific interest as to what happened to it out there. As long as it separates and gets far enough away so that there is no danger to the command module of collision as they come in, and any little bit that is imparted to it, and I think that they were calculating that this would be about 2.5 feet per second that would be imparted to it by that pop gun effect, as they call it, when the air pressure in the tunnel blew it away from the command module. Well, with that rate, you see 1 foot per second is 160 feet in a minute, and they've got an hour almost now, 57 minutes before they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, so it would be a pretty good distance away by that time. But they probably put a lot more into it than that, perhaps as much as 2.5 or 3 feet per second, and that would really get it quite a distance away. So there's no real considered danger regarding the lunar module and the spacecraft now that the separation took place. The bolts were blown, and there was no problem in getting them loose, no problem in sealing the hatch so that the command module has full integrity. It's now a normal mission. Last night, one of the briefings. Let's listen in.
Mission. Apollo 13 presently at a distance of 9,102 nautical miles from Earth, and with a velocity reading 18,952 feet per second.
Alan Bean said last night that he considered the emergency over when the command module was separated, and so...
Meanwhile, we have a listing of the crew members of the helicopters who will be airborne at the time of predicted landing. We read a estimated time of landing now of 1 hour, 10 minutes.
The schedule of events of the entry, we might give it to you again. They hit 400,000 feet at 12:53 Eastern Standard Time. I'll even give you the seconds if you want to set your stopwatches. 12:53:39 they call it, or 142 hours, 40 minutes, and 39 seconds after liftoff from the Merritt Island launch pad down in Florida a week ago tomorrow, and it seems like a month ago. They hit that 400,000-foot level at 12:53:39. The blackout begins just a few seconds later, 18 seconds later, at 12:53 and 57 seconds, almost 12:54. All these are Eastern time, of course. The end of the blackout comes 3 minutes and just about 3 minutes later, 3 minutes and 6 seconds later, 12:57:03. 12:57 is the end of the blackout. Now that 3-minute period in there is the period during which the ion buildup as the spacecraft hits that atmosphere at 25,000 miles an hour, and it heats up with that ablative shield to 5,000 degrees of heat. Well, with such heat, the atmosphere is actually ionized. It's broken down into components that defy, and have defied so far, any attempt to get radio communication through. So it's a blackout period. For 3 minutes, we don't know just what's transpiring in the spacecraft. But then it comes out of the blackout period, telemetry begins again, the lights all come on into mission control, and they know that the men are through the blackout. And then about 5 minutes after that, the drogue chute comes out, a smaller chute that begins to slow the spacecraft, stabilizes it as it gets down to the level where chutes are of any value at all. The atmosphere is thick enough to make use of them. Then the main chutes come out another minute after that and splash down at 1:07:40, 7 minutes and 40 seconds after 1 Eastern Time, or just an hour and 7 minutes from now. It is right now noon Eastern Time. Out in the Pacific, it is just dawn. Dawn is just breaking out on the Iwo Jima, and the 4 aircraft that are flying overhead, and the couple of other naval ships that are standing by, awaiting the arrival of Apollo 13. And what a moment that's going to be on the carrier, in Houston, at Mission Control, and around the world, when these men safely splash down the Pacific after this harrowing odyssey. We'll be back with more on the flight of Apollo 13 after station identification.
CBS News color coverage of the flight of Apollo 13 continues after station identification. This is CBS. CBS News color coverage of Odyssey Returns, the flight of Apollo 13, continues. Western Electric and International Paper, the sponsors of the flight of Apollo 13, have requested that their commercial messages not interrupt this portion of the coverage. Here again is Walter Cronkite.
Apollo 13, after all it has been through, including not landing on the moon, but a safe rescue mission and getting home, it's just now 49 minutes from entering the Earth's atmosphere, 1 hour and 5 minutes from splashing down, 1 hour and 4 minutes from splashing down in the Pacific. The weather at the Pacific landing site is good for the landing. The astronauts are now in apparently good spirits again after a very cold and apparently a quite miserable night aboard the lunar module. As the temperature dipped down into the low 40s, they were running out of potable water, but all other consumables were available, and they got very little sleep because of the cold and because of the preparations for the very busy time they have had this morning getting ready for landing. They are now in what would be called a normal landing posture. All of the abnormal emergency procedures have been carried out successfully. The service module was jettisoned earlier this morning. They got a look at the side of that big beast, which is the power plant for a normal mission, and one whole side had been blown away by that explosion on Monday night. That caused the termination of this mission and 4 days of such frantic work to be sure the men got home safely. And then just a little while ago, they jettisoned the lunar module, the Aquarius, that had done such noble service in providing the fuel, the heat, the oxygen, the water that they needed to come home from the moon safely. They got rid of it, said goodbye, Aquarius, good job, and it began to drift away from them. Now they are in the command module just as they would be in a normal re-entry posture, preparing for a normal re-entry, if indeed, saying when men come back from the moon, it is anything normal about it yet in our history. They are at least ready for that. They're on exactly the right trajectory, and down below, some 600 miles southeast of Pago Pago, American Samoa, the helicopter carrier ship Iwo Jima stands by, ready to pluck them out of the Pacific. And it looks like Tom Stafford will pick up a few bets around Mission Control in Houston. He was offering $10 to anybody who'd take it, that they would land right on target. And so far, all of the telemetry indicates that they are heading toward the target in the Pacific, and everyone is breathing a great deal easier. Presumably among those breathing easier are the thousands who are gathered already at many places around the world to listen to broadcasts and watch televisions, and those in Grand Central Station here in New York City, right at the noon hour for New York, right in the heart of the Manhattan, where CBS News has a large display screen, and our correspondent David Culhane. David?
Walter, people have been watching the events shown on the large screen here in the main room at Grand Central all morning. Although the numbers of people varies as the hours go by. As you can see, there are several hundred here now, some people sitting on the floor, others standing watching the screen. Even though your reports and others that they've heard are relatively confident, I think there still is a sense of foreboding about this flight. How do you feel about it? Have you been worried about them?
Very much so. Very much so. In fact, since I heard about this trouble they've had,
Right.
I've been saying a prayer for their safe return.
I should think you would agree with me that there's a great deal of courage up there in that space.
There certainly is. There certainly is. And I just hope that they make a safe land.
How about you? Have you been worried about them?
I think they need a lot of luck and a lot of prayers, and I think we'll bring them home safely.
Have you had this sense of foreboding that something might go wrong with the program, that it was going rather too well?
Yes, I have. And this morning when I heard over the radio, over CBS, that the panel was blown off, I became very worried.
Does this change your feelings about the space program at all? I mean, do you have any reservations about going ahead with this whole thing?
None at all. None at all.
You think we should go ahead?
Should continue.
How about you?
I feel that we should too, although I'm a little reluctant right now. I think we should give it several months before we give it another go.
In other words, we should give it a good think.
A good think.
How about you? Have you been worried about the astronauts?
Yeah, I guess I feel the same way everybody else does. They're our boys, and I want them back.
Does it change your mind at all about the space program?
No.
You think we should go ahead?
Yeah.
How about you?
I think we should go ahead, but like we should try to like analyze more things. Like there'd be like, I don't know, people neglect. You know, since everyone, you know, every other one went like beautiful. But this time shows like they should go into more details, analyze more different things. I think it's a good thing these three men are doing, like very heroic thing. And I don't think the whole United States, all the American people should like give them a really welcome home if they make it, which I hope they make it.
Walter, I think that those views are pretty much typical of many of the people that I've talked to this morning. They are being somewhat thoughtful about the whole program, but I think that the basic feeling here is one of concern about the astronauts.
I'm sure that you're going to have a much larger crowd even than you have down there now, David, when the lunch hour really gets underway and the people gather for the splashdown. It's always been the history of these space missions since we've had that display screen down there that we get a crowd, and certainly in view of the problems with Apollo 13, interest is again at a very high peak. We saw a kind of a sag, I think, after the first moon landing, but this has brought the attention of the world again focused on the space program. The future of the space program that you were asking those fine people about there in Grand Central is certainly one of the big questions today. We had a report from Bruce Morton a little earlier, and now confirmation of his report from the Space Administration that a review board will be appointed this afternoon, that a high official of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration will be appointed as chairman of the review board. Undoubtedly, it will include contractors and astronauts and scientists and technicians and others who have a special competency to review just what went on up there 205,000 miles from Earth, using all of the telemetry data that they have on what happened to analyze precisely what gave way, what went wrong. Was it indeed, by any chance, a meteoroid impact, although most of the experts seem to believe now that that is not likely, although it's not ruled out. It will, of course, immediately begin to be an assessment, and there is a view as dawn breaks out over the Pacific, downrange aboard the USS Iwo Jima. And you can see it's not a bad morning. Some clouds, that high cloud cover that Gordon Barnes had reported to us earlier is visible. We occasionally get those lines, incidentally, you know, through these pictures transmitted from down there. I'm still amazed you get a picture at all. Beautiful color, too. When the radar aboard the aircraft carrier swings in the right direction, or the wrong direction in our case, we get a little breakup of the picture. It's still a beautiful picture from way down there, 3,000 miles south of Hawaii, out in the middle of the Southwest Pacific. The helicopter is getting ready for the recovery mission, 66 Boss helicopter, I believe, isn't it? Is that the number?
She's still there. She's the one that's picked up the crews now from all of our lunar flights. But a famous helicopter by now.
Yeah. One of the helicopters has a television camera aboard, and we ought to get some extraordinary pictures today. If that works, relaying its picture back to the Iwo Jima, and then the Iwo Jima relaying it on up to a Pacific satellite high over the Pacific and back to us here in the United States, and indeed from there bouncing along satellites, part of the space age around the world. The people of the world will be able to share this picture, and it comes in prime time for Europe. It'll be right in the early evening viewing hours. The audience should be in the millions. There is the flight deck, the bridge, should say, on the island, so-called on these carriers. This is a helicopter carrier ship, participated in assault operations, carrying Marine helicopters out in the Vietnam War. It's now on a far more peaceful mission. The weather does indeed look quite good. Certainly the seas are relatively calm. There's not that long swell which causes such bobbing in that vessel which you first described, Wally, as a mighty fine spacecraft but a pretty lousy boat. I don't know whether that was Gemini or Mercury where you first coined those words.
Well, it wasn't a very good boat in Mercury days, so I suspect I coined it then.
It's not a lot better today.
No, it isn't.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting to notice here there are no white caps visible, so the wind is down considerably. Very often you see a little flick of a white cap on there, and of course there's
Here's Richard O'Brien. We've got Richard O'Brien aboard the USS Iwo Jima, and here he is. He's checking his watch. There he is.
Now the second one just took off from the Iwo as the prime recovery vessel begins to soar. Just now, about 55 minutes away, the recovery teams are moving into position. We are located now right on the Grand Target Point. We are 540 miles south-southeast of Pago, 2,600 miles south of Honolulu, and about 4,080 miles south-southwest of Los Angeles. Now we have three birds in the air. The weather forecast changed rapidly out here in the past 2 days. At first, there was some fear that a tropical storm called Helen would bother the recovery, but Helen is now safely away, almost 600 miles from us. According to the weathermen out here, we should be having low scattered clouds this morning, just the possibility of light rain showers. This is Richard O'Brien aboard the aircraft carrier Iwo Jima in the South Pacific.
It's a great picture of the carrier from the helicopter.
Isn't that great? Boy, what pictures we're going to get. That's magnificent, isn't it?
That is great.
Now, if that just stays as stable as that, we'll have some terrific pictures of recovery, because that's one of the helicopters that will be right there in the recovery fleet, wherever they splash down. That is within reason. They're on target. They'll be there. And that is a fine picture. There's a picture from the carrier of the helicopter, and we just saw a picture from the helicopter of the carrier. Well, wonders never cease.
Well, I hope this flight ends up like all our last ones have, with command module in view, swinging on those 3 chutes ready to be plucked out.
Those chutes are the next critical function has to take place. Everything else is just a matter of physics now, just getting through the atmosphere on the guidance that they're on, and then the chute's opening. Perhaps as we look at these pictures, we can hear some of the communications from the spacecraft again. Let's listen in. Wally, what are they doing aboard the command module right now? We don't have any communications from them.
Well, at this point, they're, of course, in re-entry attitude. They'll maintain that. They'll be looking for their external view of the horizon, looking for that moon, which...
Control, Houston, 142 hours, 3 minutes now into the flight. We presently show on one of our displays splash coordinates of 21 degrees, 39 minutes south, 165 degrees, 23 minutes west.
I assume that's the predicted, because they gave a different number.
How far off is that from the earlier prediction?
That's 3 minutes on longitude and just 1 on latitude, which is about a mile.
Apollo 13 now at an altitude of 5,862 nautical miles. The velocity now reading 22,085 feet per second.
It translates roughly 300 statute miles and 14,700 miles an hour.
That's a striking picture. Notice how small that carrier got as soon as you start going away. For a carrier pilot, they always look very small. It's a large ocean.
Earth must look like a pretty small carrier from the moon.
Well, that's an amazing thought, yes. That's very nice weather there. Notice the carrier just in a turn, it's probably just maintaining a little bit of velocity just to have steerage way, and just go around in circles, literally, waiting for the command module to get into range.
We're told that during the LEM jettison, Mrs. Hayes, Fred Hayes' wife, was watching on television, of course, sat quietly between astronaut Jerry Carr. It's over there with her to explain what was going on at this point, and the Reverend John Fellers of Clear Lake Methodist Church. Mrs. Hayes said after a successful jettisoning of the LEM, and relieved it went so well, and they are closer. Mrs. Hayes has, according to all her friends, been really remarkable through this whole thing. She's expecting their 4th child in June, and it's been quite a burden, a first flight, you know. Isn't that a pretty picture? Isn't that pretty? Just think, these are the glamorous, dramatic oceans of the Southwest Pacific, Fiji's near there, and Tahiti, and Samoa, and all those great names. You ought to be out there in that four-masted schooner of the Chilean Navy, Esmeralda, and all by yourself and absolutely isolated, and here's that helicopter with a television set revealing it all to the world.
You're sure promoting tourism in New York, Walter.
Well, not like there's so many seats on the Esmeralda, I don't think.
No. That is amazing when you think of how pacific the scene is.
The flight of Apollo 13. Odyssey now 34 minutes away from time of entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Mission Control has just passed a computer update to the onboard CMC. And as you heard Joe Kerwin's last report to the crew, telling them that the computer now belongs to them. We're at 142 hours, 7 minutes, continuing to monitor. This is Apollo Control.
We're 48 minutes from splashdown, 5,550 miles from Earth, velocity 15,690 miles an hour. That velocity keeps increasing now until they hit the atmosphere. It gets up to almost 25,000 miles an hour.
You know, it's rather interesting. Where the carrier is now, where they're about to land, is about, I'd say, 12 to 13 hours away by jet aircraft. As an old Earth orbiter, it was only 45 minutes away in those old days.
Apollo Control at 142 hours, 8 minutes now into the flight. Apollo 13 presently 5,134 nautical miles away from Earth. Velocity now reading 23,023 feet per second. We're 33 minutes away from time of entry. This is Apollo Control, Houston.
33 minutes to entry, 47 minutes to splashdown, 14 minutes between entry and splashdown. They're going to be about 44 hours away when they splash down, according to the plan from Houston, from home. They're going aboard the Iwo Jima, of course, and spend the night there, probably getting a good night's rest for a change and a comfortable bed. At least a lot more comfortable than the lunar module has been. Bubba's going to have a room to himself, and Hayes and Swigert will share one, but they're good-sized rooms aboard the Iwo Jima. And then tomorrow afternoon, as the Iwo Jima steams toward Samoa, it'll get within helicopter range, and they'll lift them off to Samoa. A very quick formal greeting from the American governor of that American territory, Samoa, and then fly by jet on home to Houston.
Jet span power amplifier to off center at this time, Jim. Off center. Yeah, there. Okay, you're still looking real fat on power. We show you having over 30 amps on the water. If you do get into a bind and don't come up, that's amp hours. Don't come up with recovery, you can always power down, and you can always put the pyro batteries on the line if you need them after you're down. Okay.
30 amps is a lot of power on the water. That's far more than nominal. They figure 12 is about nominal, which is about 8 hours of power for full power up, and this is more than twice that.
This is a quarter of the total capability, really.
Yeah.
So they're in very good shape.
Well, I was hearing they're going to jet home from Samoa, C-141. It'll get them there to Ellington Field, there by the Manned Space Center at, I think, the present schedule at 9 a.m. Central Time, Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
And there's been some talk that President Nixon might go down to be part of the welcoming party in Houston. We haven't had any confirmation of that yet. The president has been keeping up with the mission, frequent phone reports from Dr. Thomas Paine, the head of the National Space Agency, and he's had briefings from others
Well, now it's interesting. The people in mission control are becoming TV watchers also. They'll be looking up at that screen, watching the recovery operations, just as we are here. I guess that's another fallout that we forgetting about in the space program, is that satellite that's giving us this picture.
Yeah.
In fact, the camera on the recovery helicopter, I believe, is very similar to the small miniaturized camera we're using, is it not?
I think it is, and not only that, but the carrier is able to be at this precise spot in the ocean partly by navigational satellite. So, you know, this space program is complete throughout. It's got contributions all along in the program.
It'd be interesting to see that big antenna on that radar antenna stop. That means they've acquired the Odyssey on its way home, as you see it rotating right here. They're both search radar.
There are little indicators like that if we had a full picture and could watch every part of the way, we'd know a lot about what's going on before anybody told us, such as locking on with the radar. And Dr. Baird, if we knew which helicopter he's in and could identify him, once he got out of it, a flight surgeon will be in one of the helicopters overhead. He's trained as a paramedic, and he's ready to drop if the men need him. If you saw Dr. Baird bail out of the helicopter, you'd know that perhaps they're deep fatigue or something had happened aboard. That never has been the case. We've needed that in space flight. Or once they got back, if the helicopter didn't just stop there on deck for unloading and went right on over to the elevator to go down on the elevator with the crew aboard, there'd be an indication perhaps that there was something amiss.
Whenever you
right down to the hospital bay.
Never want to break that normal pattern. And the most difficult part is when you come out of that helicopter trying to walk as if you've been on board ship every day of your life, when in fact you haven't. Trying to get your sea legs instantaneously because you know cameras are on you.
Yeah. Well, is it a question of sea legs or is it a question of any kind of legs after being weightless?
Apollo Control, Houston,
I suspect it.
142 hours, 14 minutes down to the mission. Apollo 13 presently 4,075 nautical miles out from Earth. Velocity now showing 24,619 feet per second. We're less than 27 minutes now from time of entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
41 minutes to splashdown. 40 minutes now. These fellows have had quite a interesting ride on the Iwo Jima crew. They really haven't known what they were going to be up to the next few days. There for a while, it looked like the measles might cause a 1-month postponement of this flight. They were getting pretty excited because it looked like they were going to put into Samoa and maybe go on down to New Zealand and have a little cruise around for a month.
There are quite a few variables that come into place before launch day, that's for sure. When you think of how many people are deployed, which is the classic statement, all around the world to support these missions, it's quite large.
That's why the cost of postponement would have been $800 million, they figured.
Indeed.
Pretty sizable cost for postponement of the flight. Why Jack Sweigert's in that spacecraft right now instead of Ken Mattingly.
Of course, that becomes a decimal compared to the total mission when you get done with it. But
did I say 800 million a minute ago?
no, you said 800,000.
800,000, thank you.
You weren't thinking that big yet. Huh?
No, I wasn't thinking that big, but somebody else thought I was thinking that big. Maybe I was. 800,000, of course. It's interesting when the helicopter flies over there toward the west. clearly the west. It's still dark. Flies over toward the east. Looks like it's flying in daylight. One side night, one side day. Gosh. Samoa Islands, Fiji Islands. I'm going to get down there sometime.
I just went through Pup 80 about 3 weeks ago. Another odd feeling. That
You did, Tahiti.
We've got power. You can cycle it for 10 minutes if you so desire, but we don't think you need to do it, over.
Okay, we'll hold on.
Okay, real fine. How'd the EMS check go, Jack?
EMS checked out okay.
Good.
It's been initialized and setting on entry.
Roger.
The EMS, of course, is the entry monitor system, the backup to the more complex and more precise system of computer and inertial platform.
Apollo Control, Houston, 142 hours, 17 minutes now to the mission. Our digital display presently shows Apollo 13 at 3,505 nautical miles away from Earth. Now traveling at a speed of 25,693 feet per second. Jack Swigert confirms that the EMS checked well, which provides a good backup monitor for checking navigation system performance. We're at 142 hours, 18 minutes into the flight. This is Apollo Control.
EMS is the graphic display with the lines, isn't it? The graph that...
It has the velocity on one side and an acceleration on the other, and it plots a line along previously plotted lines to give you a feel for it.
You know, Leo could probably show us that out at Grumman if he's standing by. Leo Krupp, are you there?
Yes, sir, Walter.
Show us that EMS that has checked out now. It's an interesting instrument, I've always thought.
Yes, sir, Walter. This is the entry monitor system, or the EMS, right here. And as they make this entry, which will be an autopilot entry, the computer will be flying the airplane and the spacecraft. However, the crew will be watching this instrument very closely, because if the autopilot should malfunction, they will get an indication on this instrument. The crew can then take over and fly manually. And the way this works briefly is in this readout right here, they have the range to go, which is set at 1,250 miles at the present time. As they enter the atmosphere, the 05G light will come on, telling them that they are in the atmosphere. Then this will start to count down, just like an odometer on your automobile. At the same time, after 10 seconds, a corridor verification light will come on. In this case, since they're coming in very steep, this upper light will come on, telling them that they are digging into the atmosphere and that the lift vector should be up. Now, this black arrow is the location of the lift vector. They will be coming lift vector up, and this light will come on, so they will be in the proper condition. Shortly after that, a trace will appear on the scale here. Now, we have the deceleration G's on this side versus the velocity. And the way the trace will look briefly is, as they enter the atmosphere, the trace will come down here showing that they're pulling increasing G's, and the velocity will be falling off very slowly. They'll pull a maximum of about 6.6 G's, at which time, since their lift vector is up, this curve will round out and the G's will start to fall off. Now, these are the skip-out lines, these black lines, and as they come around here, as they approach being parallel to these lines, the vehicle will do a 180-degree roll and the lift vector will go down, and then from then on the GNN will fly this trace on across, maintaining the proper lift so they achieve the range to the target, and they should splash down very close to the target if the GNN is working. If the GNN is not working, as these traces look bad to the pilot, they'll merely take over and fly this visual display manually, which they can do almost as accurately as the automatic system, Walter.
Thank you, Leo. Distance right now, 3,750 miles from Earth, and the velocity is up to 17,800 miles an hour. Here's Apollo control.
Onboard computer displays showing a velocity at entry of 36,211 feet per second.
Jack Houston, you're now at 63. Looks good to us also.
Okay.
Might add an aside here that EMS system, a guidance system, was designed by one of the women in the space program, whom there are several space engineers. This is Bobby Johnson out of North American. That was all her devising, that graph system. There's that helicopter camera shot again.
Apollo Control, Houston, 142 hours, 22 minutes now into the mission.
Apparently some distance from the carrier.
Oh,
Just
on
barely see it there.
our plot board up here, we can't hardly see how far out you are.
Okay. I know all of us here want to thank all you guys down there for the very fine job you did. That's the firm, Joe.
Tell you, we all had a good time doing it.
That's about as much compliment.
We now
as the
show
pilot
Apollo
can give another
13 at a
pilot.
distance of 2,581 nautical miles.
Houston, just for your information, it looks as though battery C will deplete around shoot 9. That's expected. You've got plenty of amp hours in the other batteries.
They're just 17 minutes from hitting the atmosphere. Houston's saying they're having a good time doing it, setting up these systems. Reminded me the other night, showing that their sense of humor was being strained a little, perhaps, and they weren't much moved for kidding. Ground communicator said, Joe Kerwin, the same one is on now, set up to Fred Hayes, said, "We're just having a ball down here working out all kinds of new procedures. We expect to have
We now
your..."
show a velocity of 27,553 feet per second at 142 hours, 24 minutes.
Said, "We're just having a ball down here working out all kinds of new procedures. We expect to have your entry procedures out of here by Saturday or Sunday at the latest."
I recall that.
And Fred Hayes didn't think it was very funny. He said, "Saturday or Sunday?" Kerwin said, "At the latest, at the latest." Well, they now track that the entry angle has changed a little from that 6.51, which would be right exactly what they want. They want 6.5 down to 6.2, which gives them a little more skip than they would have.
That's, of course, well within the capability of the either system.
Yeah.
In fact, as I remember, didn't they make that last burn to bring it from 6.1 roughly up to 6.5?
Yeah.
Yeah. The burn wasn't sufficiently
Apollo
long.
Control, Houston, at 142 hours, 25 minutes now in the mission. Aboard Apollo 13.
Yeah, this really means that they didn't get much advantage out of that burn.
Over.
Go ahead.
1/10 of the
Okay,
burn.
I was going to tell you about that handover we just had, but I was a little late on the ball. Since we're fat on power and we'd kind of like to have S-band with you after blackout, we'd like you to delete the step on your entry checklist, page 2-5, after begin blackout that says power PMP'd off. We'd like you to leave it on if you think of it. Over.
Okay.
Okay.
With this skip
We're now
effect,
reading the onboard computer display, which shows a present velocity of 29,160 feet per second. This is what the crew is reading out. A range to go distance of 4,984 nautical miles. We're at 142 hours at 26 minutes into the flight. We show 14 and a half minutes from time of entry interface.
G-load is going to be a little bit less than it was earlier predicted. It's going to be down below, well below 5.2 as a matter of fact, instead of 6.7 is the calculation. Well, wouldn't that lengthen the footprint a little bit?
It would. As a result, they'll
come down range further than
they would tend to. Of course, it's what you do is fly what amounts to zero lift for some periods of time. We rotate left and rotate right, and this then tends to have you come down deeper into your footprint to land shorter, rather than go negative where you would pull more G, if you see what I'm getting at.
So, in other words, they null out this error and would get back to the predicted landing spot. We're staying tuned here to hear any communication from the command module.
13 minutes now from predicted time of entry. The onboard computer shows a velocity of 30,113 feet per second, a range to go distance of 4,683 nautical miles.
And that speed gets up to 36,211 feet per
As
second.
just reported, Flight Director Gene Kranz, we look real good here now.
I guess up to 36,211, that'll be maximum, 24,700 miles an hour. And that should be the re-entry velocity as it's now calculated.
Tell him you, as just reported to Flight Director Gene Kranz, that we have now lost tracking on Lunar Module Aquarius.
Which means that it lost tracking, it may re-entered already, right?
That would, I don't see how that could happen. Well, it must be that the...
well, they said it was going to re-enter 10 minutes before...
oh, it did? Well,
yeah.
Oh, that surely would.
And it's 25. It's just
right.
11 minutes, yeah, so it'd be just about right. I think that's what they said that last when we were talking to... I don't know if we got Alan Bean or one of them down there in Houston a little while ago. Iwo Jima makes a nice little slick as it turns there, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
It's a place to...
Jack, remember the old days when
skiing?
you land a seaplane in there. You make a big
that's
turn like
the way
that,
it was done,
make the slick, and then slide the seaplane in right alongside. That was back in the battleship Navy.
Mm-hmm. Used to do that in World War II. It blasted off O2SU is the name of the old biplane.
I remember that plane.
Catapult you off.
It's before my time, but I do
well,
remember.
Of course it was. Huh?
It's 4,332 nautical miles. We're at 142 hours, 30 minutes into the flight of Apollo 13.
And we're just now 10 minutes from the splashdown, or from the entry into the atmosphere, just coming up to 9 minutes, as a matter of fact. Nine minutes now until they enter the atmosphere, and 24 minutes. Just now 23 minutes at this turn, 24 minutes, still 24 until splashdown.
I guess the points of anguish from here on are the end of blackout, which is about 12:57, and then, of course, the report of those chutes coming out, and then life becomes much
Okay,
simpler.
at 10 minutes to 400K. You're looking good. We're real happy with the trajectory, and a minute ago we just lost contact with your friend Aquarius.
Okay. Where did she go?
Oh, I know. She's up there somewhere.
She sure was a good chip.
Hey, just as I said that, we got another burst of LEM data, so I guess it's still ticking.
We've talked quite a bit this morning of the parachute sequence. In fact, they have to open.
9 minutes now from time of entry interface. The onboard computer now reading a velocity of 32,193 feet per second. A range to go distance of 3,919 nautical miles.
Getting up close to that big number there, Walter.
Yeah, 36,211 feet per second. Sounds as if the band on the Iwo Jima is striking up a tune in anticipation. Say, we've been talking about the parachutes. They do have to work. There isn't any backup system for parachutes. That's the last function, and there isn't any redundancy. There are 3 chutes, and you can make it down with 2 of them, of the big chutes. What happens is that at 24,000 feet altitude, the cover is jettisoned to the very top that you see. You're looking right down into it, right there. Then that picture. A couple of seconds later, mortars, actual little mortar cartridges, fire out 2 white conical ribbon nylon drogue chutes. They're only about 16.5 feet in diameter. That's a pretty good diameter, but it's only compared to the main chutes we'll tell you about. Then
your Disky is doing all the right things. The GNN is go. Over.
Okay, thank you.
Well, what that means is that the display that the computer is giving is appropriately right to the time. As a result, the computer will be used for the reentry. So the reentry and the accuracy of it can be blamed upon the computer, not on the crew at this point.
That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said.
Capcom Joe Kerwin, in addition to being an astronaut, is also a medical doctor.
I sure wish I could go to the Fido party tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild one.
Was that Jim?
They're referring
Less
to
than
the
7 minutes now from time of entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Onboard display now shows a velocity of 33,383 feet per second.
We'll cover for you guys, and if Jack's got any phone numbers he wants us to call, why pass them down.
That's a beautiful bit there. Joe Kerr is referring. That was Jack Swigert that mentioned he'd like to make the post-launch splashdown party, and this is a pretty riotous occasion, at least along NASA 1. Jack, of course, is known for cruising up and down, getting phone numbers of all the pretty little girls, so they were trying to cover for him.
NASA 1 being the highway through there. Jack Swigert is one of the 4 bachelors that ought to be pointed out.
3,271 nautical miles.
4 bachelors among the astronauts.
6 minutes now from time of re-entry in the Earth's atmosphere.
We'll be back in just a moment with the return of Apollo 13 after station identification.
CBS News color coverage of the flight of Apollo 13 continues after station identification. This is CBS. CBS News color coverage of Odyssey Returns. The flight of Apollo 13 continues. International Paper and Western Electric, the sponsors of this broadcast, the flight of Apollo 13, have requested that their commercial messages not interrupt this portion of the coverage. Here again is Walter Cronkite.
18 minutes to splashdown now as Apollo 13 comes hurtling back toward Earth. 18 minutes to splashdown, but only 4 minutes until they reach the atmosphere and the tremendous heat begins to build up on the command module. They're just reporting that from Houston. Let's listen.
Reading 34,802 feet per second, range to go 2,625 nautical miles.
All of the planned emergency procedures have gone perfectly this morning. This is now what would be called a normal return from the moon. They're in the command module, heat shield forward, computers directing.
Still receiving onboard data. Still looking good. 3 minutes to go now from time of entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Onboard displays show a velocity of 35,245 feet per second. Range to go 2,301 nautical miles.
Pretty nearly up to that maximum speed. This would be 36,211 feet per second, 24,700 miles an hour.
Odyssey Houston, over.
Go ahead.
Okay, LOS in a minute or a minute and a half. At entry attitude, we'd like Omni Charlie. And welcome home, over.
Thank you.
2 minutes to go till entry. Velocity now reading 35,000 feet per second. Range to go 1,961 nautical miles.
We've got just about a minute and a half here until they lose signal now. That is, enter the blackout period. About 45 seconds before they enter the Earth's atmosphere. And begin to feel that G-load build up again for the first time, to feel the gravity of Earth again.
We've just had loss of signal from Honeysuckle with Apollo 13. Our last velocity reading was 35,837 feet per second with a range to go of 1,791 nautical miles.
I don't know why the loss of signal that much earlier than the scheduled blackout begins. Maybe that loss of signal is not the loss of all their telemetry.
I'm not sure.
But that's unusual. Doesn't mean anything's wrong.
Oh, no. It may just be out of the field of view of that particular tracking station.
Because of this, a longer blackout period than we had anticipated as far as actual communications go. This must be just a communications
Apollo 13 should have entered the Earth's atmosphere at this time. Moments ago, we had a report from the retro fire officer that based on his data, a predicted set of coordinates for splash of 21 degrees, 39 minutes south, 165 degrees, 22 minutes west.
That's within roughly 2 miles of the original number.
Period of blackout for the spacecraft should have begun about 20 some odd seconds ago.
That heat building up right now to that 5,000 degrees. The ablative shield actually melts away. And I think, Wally, that is still a secret formula, isn't it, that we use?
Yes, this process, of course, was developed simultaneously with what we called a heat sink. We used a beryllium heat shield on our first flight when the Shepard flew, and
Apollo Control
went
Houston,
to the ablative technique.
Apollo 13 should be coming up on max G right
make it
now.
much lighter. And it actually goes off as a gas. The material looks charred when it's done, but you say melting is just as good. And of course, that permits us to dissipate the heat as it trails behind the vehicle.
Must be some sight.
Our last estimate for max G was 5.2 Gs.
Should be coming out of that blackout in just about another minute and 15 seconds, according to the calculations here.
We have about a minute and a half to go during this period of blackout.
Wall-to-wall people in Grand Central Station, New York, watching it.
Here in Mission Control, the scene from the recovery ship Iwo Jima has been flashed up on one of our large screens for all of the flight controllers to watch.
That's much more
We have
graphic.
about 1 minute to go now from
There's nothing they can
time
do
of
now.
end of blackout.
They've done their work well.
Very, very well. A real crew.
Just the parachutes now. 3 big 83-foot diameter nylon chutes. They've got the whole load to bear very shortly.
About 30 seconds to go for blackout. Less than 10 seconds now. We'll attempt to contact Apollo 13 through one of the Orion aircraft.
10 minutes now.
Continue to monitor
Down
this
schedule.
Apollo Control Houston. Apollo 13 should be out of blackout at this time. We're standing by for any reports of Orion acquisition. The Orion, a C-135 type aircraft.
Raya, the range instrumented aircraft, isn't that it?
Yes. It's the 4-engine military jet, KC-135, long range, lots of fuel, and carries a large collection of electronics just for this particular purpose, to fill in the voids in the tracking range.
We ought to be hearing something. We now should have been out of that blackout by a minute, 15 seconds.
This is probably the most trying moment of any space
Coming
flight.
up now on 3 minutes until time of drogue deployment. Standing by for any reports of acquisition. We've had a report that Orion 4 aircraft has acquisition of signal.
Through the blackout.
Feeling better.
Now just the chutes, just the chutes.
Odyssey Houston standing by, over.
That's all I needed to hear.
Okay, we read you, Jack.
That was Jim Lovell responding with the OK Joe.
Checking on Joe's
Correction
hot
there,
rod.
that was Command Module pilot Jack
I thought
Swigert.
that was Swigert.
We're looking at the weather on TV, and it looks just as advertised. Real good.
That's funny, isn't it? There they are in Houston, Texas, telling the spacecraft plummeting down through the atmosphere up over the Pacific,
than
but the
2
weather
minutes
below
now
them
from
is good. They
time
can see
of
on a
drogue
picture.
deployment.
The drogue chutes should come out in another 1 minute and 30 seconds. These people watching the CBS monitor at Grand Central Station near the blue sky over the Pacific.
I'm itching to see that radar antenna on the carrier to see if it's locked on.
Less than a minute away now from time of drogue deployment.
16.5-foot drogue chute pulls out the 3 main chutes, or helps stabilize the spacecraft preparatory to pulling them out. Then a little pilot chute actually pulls them out of
Coming
that
out in 10 or 15 seconds. And, we are looking out there. We are looking
Less than 30 seconds away now from drogue deployment. The drogue deployment, these 2 chutes will provide braking and stabilization prior to main chute deployment. Standing by now for continuing to monitor.
Odyssey Houston, standing by for your now 67 when you get it over.
The animation shows it. Let's hopefully hear it here. Drogue should have been 20 seconds ago.
Strobes.
Roger that.
Got the drogue.
You see it?
They say they can see it.
A report of 2 good drogues coming up now for main chutes.
Listen to the excitement on the Iwo Jima. We can call in Richard O'Brien on the Iwo Jima. Come in, Richard.
Standing by for confirmation of
There it is.
main
I
chutes.
think that sounds right. I thought it was a chopper. That's the chopper. That was it. Oh, great news. Those are the mains.
Look at that.
Those are the 3 mains. That's the best side.
practically on the dime.
Oh,
Now the 3 chutes opened up. And gliding ever forward, quietly down. Just a beautiful sight to see. Just guessing now, but that does not look to be much more than 5 miles or so from here.
Loud applause as Apollo 13 on main chutes.
The chutes are open right on the button. It was just exactly where they said it would be, off the bow, and now the calculation is 4 miles dead ahead. So at 4 miles, it should be just a perfect pickup here. The weather good, and the men back safely. There was a lot of apprehension, of course, as to whether they'd be this accurate on this one coming back, but it's just absolutely perfect. Now you can see the helicopter teams moving in there now, circling around at just about cloud level as Apollo 13 glides softly down into the Pacific.
See a little venting of the fuel going up through
And now
there?
the Iwo Jima
That's the last bit of the attitude fuel being vented, just well, he's telling us as well.
The smoke you see is venting of RCS propellants, reaction control system propellants.
They're going through 5,000. Roger, Apollo 13, this is recovery, and your chutes look good. Apollo 13, this is recovery. We observed your RCS burn, over.
I think that's from the helicopter. That other picture was.
Just one more minute to splash down, according to the...
There's a
prediction.
helicopter picture. That's interesting.
Yeah, look at that.
You heard the conversation between the recovery helicopter and the crew of Apollo 13.
Oh, that's great.
Look at that.
Isn't that exciting? That's truly an interesting picture. Oh.
The floor of the Mission Operations Control Room now crowded. And there are visible smiles on
There are going to be some
faces
big
of
fat
the flight
cigars
controllers
lighted
and
there in mission
astronauts
control.
in this room.
See how close this...
A report from the Iwo Jima that Apollo 13 is descending at a point 4 miles due south of...
Apollo 13 and recovery passing through 1,000 feet.
About 15 seconds away from landing. Oh, boy.
That's casual. Apollo 13 and recovery passing through 1,000 feet. That's what you call formation flying, isn't it? Of course, that's just about what it is.
Through 500 feet.
Notice the slight angle now. You can see that that's to make the entry into the water easier when it's coming up.
How about it? Stable 1 and riding comfortably means that they're riding right side up. They didn't flop over in the water.
At least they got that break on that whole flight.
This is from the other helicopter, I believe, unless that's a very long lens from the carrier deck. It may be a long lens. I think it is. That's why we're getting that...
spacecraft's splashed in
Very
stable
excellent.
1. That's with the apex cover up, out of the water.
The vertical axis are approximately 15 degrees.
There's Odyssey, the end of the Odyssey.
What do we?
Recovery is maneuvering to grapple the main chute. The two other chutes are still visible in the water. Swim 1, you're cleared. Into position for retrieve the other two chutes. Swim 1, roger. This is 401. Observe the flashing light atop the command module.
See how charred that spacecraft is.
Winds in the area from 270 magnetic, approximately 6 knots.
Ooh, what a great picture from that helicopter.
That's outstanding.
Never had anything like that
No.
before.
Much better than the training exercise, doesn't it?
The pickup of the crew.
See the recovery beacon antenna atop the command module.
If you check that flashing light, of course, that's automatic after it lands. That shows up for a night landing and helps very much, of course, to acquire at least visually.
The mylar covering on the exterior of the command module has been removed in the area opposite the crew access hatch.
See the divers go underwater in a moment.
Recovery has grabbed one of the main chutes and deployed a ramp to keep it afloat. The command module is swelled 3 to 5 feet from the east. The sea is approximately 1 to 2 feet. Photo, this is Iwo Jima, interrogative astronaut condition order. 401, roger, break Apollo 13. Is the crew condition okay, over? Very good shape, over 13 minutes to put out the top right. Roger, copy Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima, copy.
They're in good shape, they just told us.
This is 401. Cloud conditions in the recovery area are approximately 6 tenths. Cloud cover combination high cirrus and low stratus.
You can see why that's not a very good boat. It's a lot of action.
There's very little wave motion. Yes.
I am assuming on scene after this time, unless otherwise to commence the retrieval operation in 1 minute over. This is Iwo Jima, roger. Left 1. Continue retrieval of that main chute, swim 2. You're ready position. Recovery is taking backup position on it. This is presently unable the third main chute. Swim 1 is grappling the second main chute. The drift of the command module is very slight at this time in the direction of 110 magnetic.
1, take standby for engine. Swim 1, roger. Relay, Steve, is approximately 10 knots. 1 mile, over. Roger, swim 1, detach. So speed to the apex cover in the depth of the table, over. Swim 2, this is recovery. You're clear to deploy. One swimmer at the speed anchor, over. That's it, roger.